Teen Titans. All right. So I could have redone all those videos, but um, yeah. So I'm just going to add the 2020 update here, which is pretty quick, so you know what the voters of Nevada did last year. So, constitutional amendment was going to take the Board of Regents. Remember that the Board of Regents is a constitutional entity. That means that there's limits to what the legislature can do to them, right? The legislature threatens them with not giving them money, which they don't hardly do anymore anyhow. Legislature gets to decide, how many regents there are. But just to give you an example of how messed up our regents are sometimes, there were 11 of them. And they were going to ask the legislature what they should do. Okay? The legislature asked them, do we have the right number of regents? So first there was a motion to keep 11. Well, they voted that down. Then there was a motion to go to 9. And they voted that down. And then there was a motion to go to 13. And they voted that down. So in the end, they voted to let the legislature decide what to do. And we have 13 regents. And if you just know, they went through this whole thing. One of their staff mansplained something. It was horrible. I'm not even going to go through it. In public, in a meeting with hundreds of people watching, he did something that in any business would have gotten you fired. Now, this was fall, right? This was 6 months ago. If you say those things to your boss at your job, you gone. But no. So instead of firing this guy, they hired a consultant and spent like $7,000 to find out what they should do. And then he was allowed to resign, like months later. It's ridiculous. It's really, really ridiculous, some of the things that our Board of Regents does. Anyway, the amendment to take them out of the Constitution and give control of the regents to the legislature directly failed. It failed by less than 4,000 votes out of hundreds of thousands of votes. It was very close. It was extraordinarily close. Passed in the South, failed in the North, and we all know the Board of Regents, for as long as there's been a Board of Regents, has favored Reno over everybody else. I won't go through that history, but you know that UNR has twice as much space per student as UNLV does. UNR has more space for its students on average than UCLA does, where UNLV has, So we're really short of space. We can't get buildings built, and UNR gets new buildings all the time. In the last 20 years, they've gotten 3 new engineering buildings, and we've gotten 1. All right? So it's So the people in the North like the Board of Regents, and the people in the South don't. But it didn't pass, and I assume it didn't pass in part because it was not very specific. It didn't say what would happen. So there were lots of people who were worried about what the legislature would do, and the legislature may come back with something that's more specific. Wouldn't be hard to do, and we'll see. You never know. All right, number 2, marriage. The provision of marriage that defined marriage as being between a man and a woman in the Nevada Constitution is gone. So the Nevada Constitution said that for 18 years. Didn't used to say that. Then in 2002, they put it in. The citizens of Nevada put it in. And in 2020, they took that out. The thing that was passed also requires equal treatment under the law for all marriages, so you can't discriminate by who it is that got married. And then it does allow clergy to refuse to perform marriages, and there's no consequences for that. You can't sue if you're, Catholic and two guys want to get married and the Catholic priest refuses to do it. You can't sue him or force him or right. So hopefully that's clear. We all know that marriage is the primary cause of divorce. And the easiest way to not get divorced is apparently not to get married. Those do seem to have a very strong correlation. Just saying. Nevada already had a pretty strong voters' Bill of Rights in its Constitution, but we made it stronger this time. So it made clear that all adults, all eligible voters have a right to vote, and there has to be non-discriminating in voting processes. You can't, we talked about Texas, where there's only one. They took areas where the Democrats live and they got rid of all the drop-off boxes in the Democrat neighborhoods, but not in the Republican neighborhoods. That kind of thing would be unconstitutional in Nevada now. You have a right to a simple ballot, a ballot that's easy and understandable, not like a butterfly ballot. You have a right to get help if you need help voting. If you go to the polling place and you're, elderly or you can't read or you have the right to get help. And you have the right to get a sample ballot before the election, to get a ballot that's mailed to you or otherwise provided to you that lets you look at all of the candidates and all of the information before you have to go vote. And that passed overwhelmingly. The marriage thing passed overwhelmingly, right? The ones that passed, there's 5 things on the ballot, 4 of them passed overwhelmingly. We're not even going to bother to talk about one of them because it's just administrivia. And then the Regents thing failed, and it was close, obviously. Renewable energy is now in the Nevada Constitution. It says Nevada must be using at least 50% renewable energy for electricity by 2030, which is not that long away. So by 2030, Nevada must be using at least 50% renewable energy for electricity by 2030. You know that there's lots of these things going on the planet Earth. You know, for example, that while I love my Corvette, it won't be that long before you aren't able to buy one with an internal combustion engine, right? So if you look at across Europe, Japan, they're not going to allow people to produce and create new gasoline-powered cars after various points in the 2030s. So, people are complaining, especially the Republicans complaining that, they're trying to get rid of gasoline and they're doing all it. Well, the world is bigger than the U.S. And as the U.S., even if the U.S. wants to keep doing something, General Motors has already said, look, the whole planet Earth, except for the U.S., is requiring all electric cars in the next 15 years. Nothing but electric cars in the next 15 years worldwide. The only country that's not doing that is the U.S. Well, we're not going to this is basically General Motors' statement, we're just not going to make cars just for the U.S. We can't make money building cars that are just for the U.S. And so, in the next 15 years, you're just not going to be able to buy a gasoline-powered car anymore unless things change dramatically over the world. So this is also a very common thing across the world, and in fact, in other places in the United States as well, that renewable energy. Nevada is a perfect place for this, right? You could build huge solar farms in Nevada that could power the whole country pretty easily. The problem is you've got to get enough storage out there so that when it's nighttime, there's still electricity, right? Yeah. And that's the 2020 update.